Hi, my name is Fredrik Samblom from the NX marketing team. Welcome to this how-to session on how to prepare for creating and handling an assembly in NX for the first time. In this session, we will be introducing you to the preferences, interface of the assembly application, and the tools that goes along with it for you to get a quick start to assemblies in NX. Prior to loading an assembly, it is important to dictate to the system how you want the assembly to be loaded, especially if a very large assembly, as this will help making you more efficient in your work with assemblies in NX. Menu, File, Options, Assembly Load Options takes you to where you can dictate the specific behavior you need for your specific assembly. Here I want to highlight the settings on how you want the system to search for the parts contained in your assembly on the file system, where you have as saved from folder or search from folder available. As saved will use the path used when the assembly was last saved. From folder will look in a specific folder only, and it would be the same folder where the assembly you are opening is located. From search folder allows for you to limit the search to a specific folder or specific folders predefined by you. In this case, we will set from search folder, but we will not define a path, just for you to understand what the system does. We also want to pay attention to the scope that is important for the purpose of you loading the assembly, where I want to highlight all components, structure only, and as saved, where all components loads all components in the assembly. Structure only loads the selected assembly only and leaves the component unloaded, but of course showing the empty structure beneath it. As saved will load the state of the assembly as it was last saved. As the electric gear motor we have here is not a very large assembly, we choose to load all components. The option drop-down allows for us to dictate what state the component should be loaded at. Here I want to highlight fully load, partially load, and minimal load. Fully load loads all components fully, together with full representation and definition, features, etc. Partially load only loads geometry, no features, etc. Saves time and performance while loading. Minimally load, lightweight display, is the lightning fast way of loading an assembly to a visual state, but remember, the data loaded is based on displayed facets only. Of course, you can change the load state of your components at any time on a need basis. I also want you to pay attention to the assembly filtering method used when it comes to reference sets. The list displayed here is the default setup and is in general fine, but you might have some customized reference sets that you want to filter to, and if so, you might want to add them here. Note that the list here is hierarchic in the way it is applied, starting from the top. Finally, at the bottom of the menu, you have the option to save and restore your load options in various ways. You can also save the load option to a file that can be handy if you want to share how to optimally load your assembly with others. So let's open an assembly to see what happens with the specific settings that we have currently set. We use the option Open and navigate to where the assembly is saved. Note that on the Open menu, you also have the Options button available for convenience and to validate the load options should you need. We check the Set Load Options, and as we are happy with the settings, we confirm with OK. We continue by selecting the specific assembly and confirm with OK. With the settings that we have decided for, you see that we get a warning for that the system cannot find the path to where the components and subassemblies are stored on the file system. We confirm the warning and see that we have loaded the assembly itself, but it is empty. When clicking on the empty nodes in the assembly navigator, the parts should open. But as the load options is set in a non-compliant way, we need to change the settings to comply to how the files are stored on the file system. We can do that with the assembly still loaded by Menu, File, Load Options, Assembly Load Options. Now, in this case, we can change from the From Search Folder option to the As Saved option, or we can continue to use the From Search Folder option and define a path to where the files reside on the file system. Here we choose to use the From Search Folder option, and this time we define a path to where the assembly and files are stored on the file system. By clicking the Show Session Folder option, we quickly get to the folder where the assembly is stored. By adding 3 punctuations after the path, we tell the system to also search subfolders if there are any. Now when clicking the empty node in the Assembly Navigator, the components and subassemblies opens as they should. As we are to deal with assemblies, we now activate the assembly application to briefly study the interface. To the far left on the ribbon bar, we have the basic functions such as assemble and add component. Assemble will add a part as a component to the assembly and directly provide you dictating the positional behavior of the component. This is very beneficial when you have non-complex relationships between the interacting parts in the assembly. When adding one or more parts to be positioned in a more complex way, you would consider adding the parts using Add Components, and then choose the relationship in the position group on the ribbon bar. The position group contains all the tools for creating the constraints that is needed to fully describe how the components are interacting with each other in the assembly. The most used would be the Fixed, Touch, and Align. The Auto Align option is great and a quick way of positioning most of your components. In addition to the constraints, there are also the option to use joints and couplers. These are a bit more advanced as they also define how parts move relative to each other. The good part, however, is that if used, the constraint can be reused downstream by, for example, the motion application and others within NX, where motion of the assembly is utilized. Move component and pattern components are also tools that we will be looking at in this session. The Assembly Navigator is a crucial tool when dealing with assemblies. Primarily, you use this tool to navigate your assembly. You most likely want to tailor the columns of your Assembly Navigator to contain the attributes of your interest. Simply right mouse button click on the top border of your Assembly Navigator window and activate the columns of your liking. As you see, there is a wide range of attributes you can add to your visual columns. Scrolling to the bottom and selecting Configure provides you with the opportunity to add additional specific attributes as you need them. In my example here, I'm using primarily the position, load state, quantity, and representation options. That for my purpose here is sufficient. The Constraint Navigator is a great tool to navigate the assembly constraints of all the contained components, especially if you're looking for potential issues. Finally, we will have a look at the file system and the folder structure where we have organized our project for easy access and handling for all our team members. It is crucial to organize your files logically on the file system if you're working natively without the support of a PDM system. In this case, you can see that we have already created a named project folder containing subfolders representing the various departments that are handling the data within our organization. The folders we have are Administration in general, design department, manufacturing department, standard department, supplier department, and validation department. Natively, this enables to control the data and who can do what and where. Bottom line here is that you have a structure and a plan for to handle your data. Now, with a grasp of all the prerequisites and the interface, we close down the current assembly. A final setup before starting assembling and to make life easier while in process is to add the design folder as a palette on the resource bar. We easily do this by Menu, Preference, Palettes. By adding the design folder, we now have a super easy access to most of the files that we need, and where we can utilize drag and drop while adding parts as components to the assembly. Here we see the palette to the left, and with large icons it's easy to find the parts of interest. If a large amount of parts, you can utilize the search option at the top of the palette to narrow down to only the parts of interest. This concludes this how-to session on crucial preparations prior to building your first assembly. To summarize what you have seen the important steps of setting up your preferences for to be able to efficiently handle your assembly within NX. We have had a look into the very important load options that dictates how your assembly files should be loaded, and where we have set how NX should search for files on the file system, to what state the file should be loaded, like fully loaded or minimal loaded, assembly filtering methods using reference sets, and that you can save the load options for quick return and to share with other team members when necessary. You have also seen how to configure columns in the Assembly Navigator that provides easy access to crucial attributes in the configurable columns of the Navigator. We have demonstrated the typical folder structure for to keep your project organized. And finally, we have set the system up for easy access to the project folder by defining a palette that can easily be used for drag and drop. This concludes this how-to session on preparing to build your first assembly. And with that final statement, I would like to humbly thank you for your time and attention.